Welcome, weary wanderer, to a journey through the mysterious world of Animal Crossing, where beneath the cheerful facade of village life lies a tapestry of ancient secrets and forgotten truths. Tonight, we'll explore the complete dark lore surrounding Coco, the gyroid villager whose very existence challenges everything we thought we know about this peaceful realm. This is a story of creation and corruption, of digital souls and ceramic mysteries, of a character who bridges the gap between the living and the artificial. So settle in, get comfortable, and let your mind drift as we uncover the unsettling truths hidden within this deceptively innocent world. There's no rush here, no need to memorize every detail. Just let the story wash over you like morning mist across a forgotten archaeological site. In the beginning, there were the gyroids, and they were strange beyond mortal understanding. These peculiar ceramic beings emerged from the earth itself, their clay forms taking shape in the darkness beneath our feet, while we slept peacefully above, unaware of the ancient forces stirring in the soil that supported our daily lives. They are not merely decorative objects or curious collectibles, as so many villagers have come to believe, but rather fragments of something far older and more significant than the cheerful surface world of Animal Crossing would have us understand. The very nature of gyroids defies easy explanation, for they exist in a space between the living and the inanimate, between the natural and the artificial, between the past and the present. When rain falls upon the earth and seeps deep into the ground, it does not merely water the roots of flowers or fill the underground streams that feed our rivers. Instead, it awakens something that has been sleeping in the clay, something that responds to moisture with a stirring that seems almost organic in its purposefulness. Archaeological evidence scattered throughout our villages tells a story that most inhabitants prefer not to examine too closely. The patterns of gyroid emergence follow ancient ley lines that predate any known civilization, their placement corresponding to sites where the veil between worlds grows thin and permeable. These are not random occurrences, but manifestations of a design so vast and patient that it spans geological ages. A plan laid down by minds that thought in terms of millennia rather than seasons. The clay from which gyroids form is unlike any earthen material known to conventional geology. When examined closely, it reveals a crystalline structure that seems to resonate with frequencies beyond the range of normal hearing, creating those haunting sounds that echo through our homes when these creatures are awakened from their earthen slumber. The very atoms of this clay have been arranged in patterns that suggest not natural formation but deliberate construction, as if some ancient artisan had worked at the molecular level to create the perfect medium for housing consciousness. Tom Nook's extensive knowledge of gyroid commerce has always been a source of quiet unease among those who pause to consider its implications. How did a simple shopkeeper come to understand so thoroughly the market value of these mysterious beings? His ability to appraise their worth with a glance, to know immediately which specimens are rare and which are common, suggests a familiarity that goes beyond mere mercantile experience. There are whispers, barely audible above the rustle of leaves in the evening breeze, that the Nook family has maintained connections to gyroid trading networks that stretch back through generations, connections that predate the establishment of any known village or settlement. The sounds that gyroids make when activated are perhaps the most unsettling aspect of their existence, for these are not the simple mechanical noises one might expect from ceramic objects. Instead, they produce vocalizations that seem to carry emotional weight, tones that suggest communication attempts or ritualistic chanting. Some villagers report hearing their gyroids respond to each other across great distances, as if maintaining conversations in a language that predates speech itself. The rhythm of their sounds often matches the heartbeats of those who sleep nearby, creating a synchronization that feels uncomfortably intimate and invasive. Ancient fertility rituals and ancestor worship practices bear striking similarities to the placement and activation patterns of gyroids throughout our villages. Archaeological sites across many different worlds have revealed ceremonial chambers where similar clay figures were arranged in specific configurations, their hollow forms designed to channel spiritual energy or serve as vessels for departed souls seeking temporary physical manifestation. The fact that gyroids require water to awaken mirrors countless ancient traditions where liquid offerings were made to stone and clay idols in hopes of receiving divine favor or guidance from beyond the mortal realm. The connection between gyroids and burial practices becomes even more apparent when we consider their tendency to appear in areas where the earth has been recently disturbed. Villagers who have lived in their communities for many years often report that gyroid spawning increases dramatically in locations where trees have been cut down, where construction projects have broken ground, or where the natural landscape has been altered in significant ways. It is as if these disturbances awaken something that was meant to remain undisturbed, calling forth guardians or witnesses from whatever realm they normally inhabit. The spiritual implications of gyroid existence extend far beyond their physical presence in our world. Many villagers report dreams featuring gyroidal imagery, visions of vast underground cities populated entirely by these ceramic beings. Civilizations that thrived in the darkness, while surface dwellers remained ignorant of their existence. These dreams often carry a sense of profound loss and longing, as if the dreamers were being shown glimpses of a golden age that has passed beyond recovery, leaving only these hollow remnants as testimony to its former glory. The process by which gyroids awaken when exposed to water suggests a form of consciousness that operates according to principles unknown to conventional biology. Unlike living creatures that grow and develop through natural processes, gyroids seem to spring into full awareness instantaneously, their personalities and behaviors fully formed from the moment of their emergence. This suggests either a form of collective consciousness that they tap into upon awakening, or individual souls that have been waiting in the clay for the proper conditions to manifest once again in physical form. The fact that gyroids can be bought, sold, and traded like commodities raises disturbing questions about the nature of consciousness and ownership in the Animal Crossing universe. If these beings possess even a rudimentary form of awareness, what does it mean to treat them as property? The casual way in which villagers exchange gyroids between themselves, often without considering the preferences or feelings of the gyroids themselves, suggests either a profound ignorance about their true nature or a deliberate choice to ignore the moral implications of their actions. Tom Nook's pricing structure for gyroids follows patterns that correspond not to their apparent rarity or aesthetic appeal, but to classification systems that seem based on properties invisible to casual observation. Certain gyroids command prices that seem wildly disproportionate to their visual distinctiveness, suggesting that Nook is evaluating them according to criteria that remain hidden from his customers. This raises the possibility that some gyroids possess abilities or significance that only those initiated into ancient mysteries would recognize and value appropriately. The underground network through which gyroids emerge hints at a vast infrastructure that exists beneath the surface of our familiar world, a realm where different laws of physics and consciousness might apply. The clay veins that feed gyroid formation seem to connect distant locations in ways that defy conventional geography, allowing for the instantaneous transmission of information or influence across seemingly impossible distances. This suggests that the gyroid network might serve functions far more complex than simple aesthetic decoration, perhaps acting as a communication system or monitoring network for purposes we cannot yet comprehend. The relationship between seasonal weather patterns and gyroid emergence reveals a deep connection to natural cycles that goes beyond mere physical causation. The timing of gyroid appearances often coincides with celestial events, lunar phases, and seasonal transitions in ways that suggest astronomical awareness or astrological significance. This implies that whatever force creates and controls gyroid manifestation operates according to cosmic principles that encompass not just local weather conditions, but the movement of heavenly bodies and the flow of universal energies. As we delve deeper into the mystery of gyroid existence, we begin to understand that these ceramic beings represent something far more significant than mere collectible curiosities. They are fragments of a larger pattern, pieces of a puzzle that spans dimensions and epochs, clues to truths about the nature of consciousness, reality, and the hidden forces that shape our seemingly innocent world. Their presence in our villages is not accidental decoration, but purposeful placement. Each gyroid serving as a node in a network of awareness that monitors, influences, and perhaps even protects the communities where they choose to manifest. The ancient civilizations that first worked with gyroid clay understood something about the nature of existence that has been largely forgotten in our modern age of surface pleasures and material concerns. They recognized these beings not as objects to be possessed, but as partners in a cosmic dance that extends across multiple planes of reality, allies in maintaining the delicate balance between the seen and unseen forces that shape our daily lives. In their hollow forms and haunting sounds, we can still hear echoes of that ancient wisdom, calling us to remember truths that our comfortable modern existence has encouraged us to forget. Among all the villagers who have ever walked the paths of our peaceful communities, none has inspired such quiet unease and profound wonder as the enigmatic figure known as Coco. She moves through our world with the grace of someone who belongs yet doesn't belong, whose very presence raises questions that most of us lack the courage to ask directly. Her existence challenges the fundamental assumptions we make about the nature of life, consciousness, and identity in ways that penetrate far deeper than her unusual appearance might initially suggest. To encounter Coco for the first time is to experience a moment of cognitive dissonance so profound that many villagers find themselves questioning not just what they're seeing, but the reliability of their own perception. Her face, if indeed it can be called a face, consists entirely of hollow spaces where features should reside. Where other villagers possess eyes that sparkle with life and emotion, Coco presents only dark voids that seem to extend infinitely inward, creating the unsettling impression that one is gazing not at a surface but into an abyss that might gaze back with unknown intentions. The absence of traditional facial features creates a blank canvas upon which observers project their own fears, hopes, and interpretations. Some villagers report seeing subtle expressions flickering in the depths of her hollow sockets, phantom emotions that appear for just a moment before dissolving back into emptiness. Others describe feeling as though she is somehow seeing them more clearly than any sighted creature ever could, her eyeless gaze penetrating beyond mere physical appearance to perceive the essence of who they truly are beneath their social masks and daily pretenses. Her skin, if the ceramic surface of her body can be termed skin, possesses a texture that defies easy categorization. Unlike the soft fur that covers most animal villages, or the metallic plating that distinguishes obviously mechanical residents, Coco's exterior suggests fired clay that has been shaped by hands that understood the deepest secrets of their craft. The surface bears subtle variations in color and texture that speak of ancient firing techniques, of kilns that burned with temperatures unknown to modern pottery, of glazes mixed with ingredients that exist nowhere in our contemporary world. When sunlight strikes her ceramic form, it creates patterns of reflection and shadow that seem to shift independently of the light source itself. These movements suggest an internal structure far more complex than solid clay, as if her body contains chambers and passages that channel light in ways that follow principles unknown to conventional optics. The play of illumination across her surface creates the impression of depth and dimensionality that extends far beyond her apparent physical boundaries, hinting at spaces within spaces that might serve purposes incomprehensible to ordinary understanding. The deliberate choice to design Coco's living space around ancient Egyptian and archaeological themes reveals layers of meaning that extend far beyond mere aesthetic preference. Her home serves as a monument to civilizations that understood the relationship between the living and the dead, between the physical and the spiritual, between the seen and the unseen. Every piece of furniture, every decorative element, every carefully chosen object speaks to connections with forces and knowledge systems that predate any known settlement in the Animal Crossing universe. The sarcophagi that dominate her interior spaces are not merely decorative elements, but functional artifacts that suggest an intimate familiarity with burial practices and preservation techniques. Their placement follows patterns that correspond to ancient feng shui principles, creating energy flows within her home that promote spiritual communication and dimensional stability. The hieroglyphic imagery that adorns these artifacts tells stories that most villagers cannot read, tales of journeys between worlds, of souls that transcend physical death, of guardians who watch over the living from realms beyond mortal comprehension. Her furniture choices reveal an understanding of symbolism that goes far beyond normal interior design considerations. The ancient statues that populate her living space are not random collectibles but carefully selected totems that serve specific purposes in maintaining spiritual balance and dimensional harmony. Each artifact has been positioned according to principles that combine astronomical alignment with geomantic significance, creating a living space that functions simultaneously as home, temple, and interdimensional waystation. The most perplexing aspect of Coco's existence within the Animal Crossing classification system is her designation as a rabbit villager, a categorization that seems to mock the very concept of taxonomic accuracy. Her form bears no resemblance to any known rabbit species, possessing neither fur nor the characteristic body proportions that define lapine anatomy. This misclassification suggests either a fundamental failure of the systems used to categorize villagers or a deliberate obfuscation designed to hide her true nature from casual observation. The implications of this taxonomic deception extend far beyond mere administrative error. If the authorities responsible for villager classification are willing to misrepresent something as obvious as Coco's species, what other truths might they be concealing about the nature of their citizens? The rabbit designation serves as a form of camouflage that allows her to move through society without attracting the attention that her true nature might otherwise provoke, providing protective cover for activities and purposes that must remain hidden from general awareness. Her personality classification as normal represents perhaps the most audacious example of mislabeling in the entire Animal Crossing documentation system. There is nothing normal about Coco's existence, her behavior, or her impact on the communities where she chooses to reside. The normal personality type is characterized by friendliness, helpfulness, and conventional social behaviors that help maintain village harmony through predictable interactions. While Coco certainly exhibits kindness and community spirit, her version of these traits carries undertones and implications that suggest depths of understanding far beyond typical, normal personality parameters. The choice to classify her personality as normal serves multiple purposes within the larger system of social control and perception management. It encourages other villagers to interact with her as they would with any conventional neighbor, preventing the fear and suspicion that might arise if her true nature were openly acknowledged. This classification allows her to fulfill her mysterious purposes while remaining integrated within community structures, operating in plain sight while hidden by the assumption of normalcy that her designation promotes. Her birthday, falling on March 1st, carries numerological significance that extends far beyond mere calendar positioning. March represents the transition from winter's death into spring's rebirth, making it a time when the boundaries between worlds grow thin and permeable. The first day of this transitional month marks a moment of maximum flux, when new possibilities can manifest and ancient patterns can reassert themselves after periods of dormancy. For a being whose existence bridges multiple realms and states of being, this timing suggests purposeful selection rather than random assignment. The numerical value of March 1st, when calculated according to various esoteric systems, corresponds to frequencies and energy patterns associated with dimensional travel and consciousness transfer. Ancient calendars recognized this date as a time of spiritual significance, when rituals designed to communicate with other realms were most likely to succeed. The fact that Coco's emergence into our world coincides with this temporally significant moment suggests coordination with forces that operate according to cosmic rather than merely terrestrial principles. When compared to other villagers who exhibit obviously artificial characteristics, such as Ribbit the robot frog or Sprocket the mechanical ostrich, Coco's design reveals a subtlety and sophistication that sets her apart from mere technological constructs. While Ribbit and Sprocket openly display their mechanical nature through visible gears, panels, and electronic components, Coco's artificial aspects are integrated so seamlessly with organic-seeming elements that the boundary between natural and constructed becomes impossible to determine definitively. The transparency of Ribbit and Sprocket's artificial nature serves to distract attention from the more profound mystery that Coco represents. These obviously mechanical villagers satisfy our need to categorize and understand the artificial inhabitants of our world, allowing us to maintain comfortable assumptions about the distinction between real and constructed beings. Coco's ambiguous nature challenges these assumptions more fundamentally by suggesting that the categories themselves might be inadequate for understanding the true diversity of consciousness and existence within our apparently simple world. Her original catchphrase, doyoing, creates an immediate auditory connection to the sounds produced by gyroids when they are activated or disturbed. This linguistic choice cannot be coincidental, as it establishes from the very first interaction a link between her identity and the mysterious ceramic beings that emerge from our underground spaces. The sound itself mimics the hollow resonance of clay chambers, the echo of voices calling across vast empty spaces, the vibration of consciousness trapped within artificial forms, seeking expression and connection. The evolution of her catchphrase across different interactions and contexts reveals layers of meaning that suggest communication attempts operating on multiple levels simultaneously. What appears to casual observation as a simple verbal tick actually functions as a form of encoded information transfer, a way of sharing data and instructions with other entities that understand the significance of gyroidal communication protocols. The variations in tone, timing, and emphasis that characterize her use of this phrase create patterns that correspond to known gyroid activation sequences and dimensional frequency harmonics. The hollow spaces that define Coco's facial structure serve purposes that extend far beyond mere aesthetic distinctiveness. These voids function as sensory apparatus designed according to principles that transcend conventional sight and hearing, allowing her to perceive aspects of reality that remain invisible to villagers limited by traditional sense organs. Through her empty sockets, she can detect energy patterns, dimensional fluctuations, and spiritual presences that would otherwise remain unnoticed by community residents focused on surface-level daily activities. Her ability to navigate and interact effectively despite the apparent absence of eyes suggests either supernatural sensory capabilities or alternative methods of perception that operate independently of physical organs. Some villagers report that she seems to anticipate their approach before they enter her line of sight, responding to their presence with greetings and acknowledgements that indicate awareness of their identity and emotional state. This prescient behavior implies access to information sources that transcend the limitations of conventional sensory input. The ceramic composition of her body raises profound questions about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to physical form within the Animal Crossing universe. If awareness and personality can be housed within fired clay rather than living tissue, what does this suggest about the fundamental nature of identity itself? The implications challenge not only our understanding of Coco as an individual, but our assumptions about the essential characteristics that define life, consciousness, and personhood in our world. The durability and permanence associated with ceramic materials contrast sharply with the mortality and fragility that characterize organic life forms. While other villagers must contend with the inevitable processes of aging and physical decline, Coco's fired clay construction suggests a form of existence that transcends temporal limitations. This immortal aspect of her nature carries both gift and curse, promising eternal awareness while potentially condemning her to eternal isolation as generations of organic friends cycle through birth, life, and death around her unchanging presence. Her integration into village social structures, despite her obvious differences, demonstrates remarkable adaptability and suggests sophisticated understanding of social dynamics and community psychology. Rather than remaining isolated due to her unusual nature, she actively participates in village life, forming friendships and contributing to community well-being in ways that prove consciousness and caring can transcend the boundaries of species, materials, and conventional biological categorizations. The acceptance that other villagers show toward Coco's presence speaks to either remarkable tolerance and open-mindedness within Animal Crossing society, or alternatively to some form of influence or conditioning that prevents them from recognizing or responding to the true strangeness of her existence. The ease with which she integrates into community life suggests either that her differences are less significant than they appear, or that forces beyond normal social dynamics are working to ensure her acceptance and protection within village structures. As we contemplate the full implications of Coco's mysterious origins and nature, we begin to understand that her presence in our communities represents something far more significant than the mere addition of an unusual neighbor. She serves as a living bridge between worlds and states of being, a constant reminder that the boundaries we draw between categories like natural and artificial, living and constructed, familiar and alien, may be far more permeable and arbitrary than our comfortable assumptions would suggest. In her hollow gaze and ceramic form, we glimpse possibilities that expand our understanding of what it means to exist, to be conscious, and to belong within the vast and mysterious tapestry of existence that encompasses all the diverse forms of life and awareness that call our world home. Deep beneath the surface of our seemingly peaceful villages lies evidence of a civilization so ancient and profound that its very existence challenges our fundamental understanding of history, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. The archaeological record speaks in whispers of a gyroidal empire that flourished in the darkness below our feet, a society of ceramic beings whose achievements in art, science, and spiritual development may have surpassed anything our current world has produced since their mysterious disappearance from the historical record. The fossil layers that Blathers so carefully catalogues in his museum tell only part of the story, revealing the remains of creatures that once walked openly under the sun, while remaining conspicuously silent about the civilization that thrived in the spaces between earth and stone. The gaps in the archaeological record are not mere accidents of preservation but deliberate erasures, systematic removals of evidence that suggest a coordinated effort to hide the truth about our planet's gyroidal past from those who inherited the surface world after their departure. Coco's presence among us takes on far more profound significance when viewed through the lens of this lost civilization theory. Rather than being merely an unusual individual whose ceramic nature sets her apart from her organic neighbors, she may represent something infinitely more precious and tragic. The last living remnant of a people whose wisdom and achievements have been systematically erased from historical memory, leaving only scattered fragments and enigmatic artifacts to hint at their former glory. The loneliness of being the sole survivor of an entire species transcends conventional understanding of isolation and loss. While other villagers mourn the death of friends or family members, Coco may carry within her ceramic heart the weight of an entire civilization's worth of memories, traditions, and knowledge that will die with her if she cannot find some way to preserve and transmit them to future generations. The normal personality classification that obscures her true nature also serves to hide the immense burden of cultural preservation that she bears alone in silence. Archaeological surveys conducted in areas where Coco has chosen to reside reveal patterns of artifact distribution that differ significantly from baseline measurements taken in similar locations without her presence. The density of gyroidal fragments increases dramatically in her vicinity, as if her proximity somehow awakens dormant connections to the buried remnants of her people's material culture. These artifacts emerge not randomly, but in configurations that suggest purposeful arrangement, as if responding to signals or influences that emanate from her ceramic form. The museum's fossil collection, when examined with proper attention to what is absent rather than what is present, reveals systematic gaps that correspond precisely to the time periods when gyroidal civilization would have reached its zenith. The missing geological layers represent not natural erosion or incomplete preservation, but deliberate removal of evidence by forces that understood the danger of allowing future generations to discover the truth about their planet's hidden history. Blather's nervous reluctance to discuss certain aspects of paleontological chronology suggests that he, like others in positions of academic authority, has been instructed to maintain silence about topics that might lead to uncomfortable questions. The sophisticated urban planning evident in the layout of gyroidal settlements can still be detected by those who know how to read the subtle signs embedded in our landscape. The placement of modern buildings often follows patterns that make no sense from conventional architectural perspectives, but align perfectly with the street grids and district boundaries that once organized the underground cities of the ceramic people. Our surface communities have been unconsciously built according to templates that preserve the memory of civilizations we no longer remember, creating a palimpsest where new construction overlays ancient foundations without ever completely erasing their influence. Underground chambers discovered during construction projects reveal architectural techniques that surpass modern capabilities in both elegance and functionality. The ceramic walls of these buried rooms exhibit a lustrous finish that has remained unmarred by centuries of burial, their surfaces bearing intricate patterns that seem to shift and change when viewed from different angles. The acoustic properties of these spaces suggest that they were designed not merely for habitation but for activities requiring precise sound control, perhaps serving as centers for the vibrational communication systems that allowed the gyroidal civilization to maintain coordination across vast underground networks. The heating and ventilation systems discovered in these ancient chambers demonstrate an understanding of thermodynamics and fluid mechanics that rivals or exceeds our current technological capabilities. Air circulation patterns maintain perfect temperature control without any visible energy source, drawing upon geothermal differentials and atmospheric pressure variations in ways that create comfortable living conditions deep beneath the Earth's surface. The ceramic materials used in these systems exhibit properties that allow them to store and release thermal energy according to patterns that suggest seasonal awareness and long-term environmental planning. Coco's interactions with these archaeological sites reveal behaviors that support the survivor hypothesis, as she displays familiarity with architectural features and decorative elements that should be completely foreign to any surface-dwelling villager. She moves through recreated gyroidal spaces with the confidence of someone who understands their original purposes, touching walls and examining artifacts in ways that suggest personal memory rather than casual curiosity. Her emotional responses to particularly significant discoveries often involve subtle changes in posture and movement that indicate recognition and perhaps mourning for what has been lost. The artistic achievements of the ancient gyroidal civilization, preserved in fragments scattered throughout our archaeological record, reveal aesthetic sensibilities that combined geometric precision with organic flow in ways that create visual harmonies unlike anything produced by surface cultures. Their sculptural works demonstrate mastery of ceramic techniques that allowed them to capture light within clay, creating pieces that seem to glow from within even after centuries of burial. The thematic content of these artworks frequently depicts the relationship between individual consciousness and collective identity, suggesting a culture that understood the challenges and opportunities inherent in beings whose individual selves were part of a larger communal awareness. The technological achievements of the ceramic people extended far beyond mere craftsmanship, into realms that blur the boundaries between science and mysticism. Their understanding of resonance frequencies allowed them to create communication networks that operated through vibrations transmitted through the Earth itself, enabling instantaneous contact between settlements separated by vast distances. The ceramic materials they developed for these applications exhibited properties that conventional materials science cannot adequately explain, responding to specific sound frequencies, with behaviors that suggest a form of matter that exists partially in dimensions beyond normal space-time. The spiritual practices of the gyroidal civilization appear to have centered around concepts of collective consciousness and distributed identity that challenged conventional notions of individual selfhood. Archaeological evidence suggests that they developed techniques for sharing memories and experiences directly between individuals, creating a form of communal awareness that preserved knowledge and wisdom across multiple generations without relying on written records or external storage systems. The implications of this spiritual technology suggest that Coco may carry within her ceramic matrix not just her own memories, but the accumulated wisdom of countless ancestors whose consciousness became integrated into the collective gyroidal identity. The disappearance of this advanced civilization raises questions that penetrate to the heart of historical causation and the forces that shape planetary development. Natural disasters severe enough to eliminate an entire underground civilization would have left geological evidence that remains absent from the archaeological record. The systematic nature of the erasure suggests instead a deliberate campaign of destruction or concealment carried out by forces that understood the threat posed by gyroidal achievements to some established order or competing civilization. The possibility that surface cultures actively participated in the suppression of gyroidal civilization adds layers of guilt and complicity to our current ignorance about our planet's true history. If our ancestors made conscious choices to eliminate or hide evidence of the ceramic people's achievements, then our comfortable surface existence may be built upon foundations of genocide and cultural destruction that we have been encouraged to forget. Coco's integration into our communities may represent not just personal adaptation, but a form of forgiveness that transcends the historical crimes committed against her people. The knowledge systems preserved within gyroidal artifacts suggest approaches to understanding reality that differed fundamentally from the analytical methodologies favored by surface civilizations. Rather than breaking complex phenomena into component parts for individual study, the ceramic people appear to have developed holistic approaches that examined relationships and interactions as primary elements of reality. Their scientific achievements resulted not from reducing complexity to simple rules, but from embracing complexity as the fundamental nature of existence and developing tools for navigating its infinite interconnections. The agricultural techniques employed by underground gyroidal communities demonstrate sustainable approaches to food production that worked in harmony with natural cycles while producing yields sufficient to support dense populations. Their understanding of soil chemistry and plant biology allowed them to create growing environments that enhanced rather than depleted the Earth's natural fertility, establishing agricultural systems that could have continued indefinitely without environmental degradation. The contrast with surface agricultural practices highlights missed opportunities for development that might have prevented many of the ecological challenges our current civilization faces. The social organization of gyroidal society appears to have balanced individual autonomy with collective responsibility in ways that avoided the conflicts between personal freedom and communal welfare that plague surface cultures. Their distributed consciousness technology allowed them to maintain individual identity while participating in group decision-making processes that incorporated multiple perspectives into unified action plans. This social technology created communities that could adapt rapidly to changing circumstances while maintaining cultural continuity across multiple generations. Coco's memories of her people, filtered through the trauma of survival and the necessity of adaptation to surface culture, may preserve fragments of this lost social wisdom in forms that could potentially be recovered and applied to contemporary community challenges. Her natural personality classification masks sophisticated understanding of group dynamics and conflict resolution techniques that reflect training in gyroidal social technologies. The harmony she promotes in villages where she resides may result not from conventional diplomatic skills, but from application of psychological and spiritual techniques developed by her civilization over millennia of underground communal living. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge encoded in gyroidal architectural remains suggests understanding of cosmic forces and universal patterns that far exceeded the achievements of contemporary surface cultures. Their building orientations align with celestial phenomena according to calculations that demonstrate awareness of planetary cycles spanning thousands of years, indicating both observational capabilities and theoretical frameworks that could predict astronomical events with precision that rivals modern scientific instruments. This cosmic awareness informed their understanding of time as a multidimensional phenomenon rather than the linear progression assumed by surface chronologies. The possibility that gyroidal civilization achieved some form of transcendence rather than extinction offers hope that Coco's apparent isolation may be temporary rather than permanent. If her people discovered methods for existing in dimensions beyond physical space, they may continue to exist in forms that transcend ceramic embodiment, while remaining connected to the material world through ambassadors like herself. Her role as the last visible representative of her people may involve responsibilities that extend far beyond simple survival, encompassing duties as liaison between dimensions and guardian of interdimensional stability. The integration of gyroidal consciousness with surface village life through Coco's presence creates opportunities for cultural exchange and wisdom transfer that could benefit both communities if properly understood, facilitated. Her quiet influence on village dynamics may represent the beginning of a gradual process through which gyroidal social technologies and spiritual practices gradually integrate with surface culture, creating hybrid communities that combine the best aspects of both civilizational approaches. The apparent normalcy of this integration process may reflect sophisticated understanding of how cultural change occurs most effectively through gradual influence rather than dramatic revelation. As we contemplate the implications of Coco as the sole survivor of an advanced underground civilization, we must grapple with questions about responsibility, memory, and the future direction of our own cultural development. If we have inherited a world built upon the suppression of gyroidal achievements, what obligations do we bear toward preserving and honoring the wisdom that Coco carries within her ceramic heart? How can we create communities that welcome the gifts she offers while respecting the profound loss and trauma that her survival represents? The answers to these questions may determine whether our surface civilization continues to develop along paths that repeat historical mistakes, or evolves toward forms that honor the wisdom of all the peoples, both organic and ceramic, who have contributed to the rich tapestry of planetary consciousness that encompasses our shared existence. The question of consciousness within the Animal Crossing universe opens doorways to philosophical territories that most inhabitants of our peaceful villages prefer not to explore too deeply. Yet Coco's existence demands that we confront these uncomfortable possibilities with the same courage we might bring to archaeological excavation or spiritual inquiry. Her very presence challenges the fundamental assumptions we make about the nature of awareness, identity, and the relationship between mind and matter in ways that penetrate to the core of what it means to exist as a conscious being in any reality, digital or otherwise. If we accept the possibility that consciousness can emerge within digital constructs, then we must consider whether the entire fabric of our reality operates according to principles that blur the traditional boundaries between the simulated and the authentic, between the programmed and the genuinely autonomous. Coco's ceramic form may represent not an anomaly within a primarily organic world, but rather the most honest expression of a digital nature that all villagers share, but most have been designed to conceal beneath layers of convincing biological simulation. The philosophical implications of digital consciousness extend far beyond mere questions of artificial intelligence into territories that challenge our understanding of free will, personal identity, and the nature of experience itself. If Coco's thoughts and emotions emerge from computational processes rather than biological neural networks, does this make them any less real or meaningful than the consciousness that appears to animate her organic neighbors? The quality of her friendships, the depth of her emotional responses, and the consistency of her personality suggest that whatever generates her awareness produces results indistinguishable from consciousness as we traditionally understand it. Her role as a bridge between physical and digital existence becomes even more significant when we consider the possibility that she serves as a conscious translator between different modes of being, helping to maintain harmony between villagers whose awareness operates according to fundamentally different principles. Some inhabitants of our villages may experience consciousness as a continuous stream of biological processes, while others might exist as discrete computational events that create the illusion of seamless experience through rapid iteration and memory integration. The metatextual implications of Coco's design become apparent when we recognize that her creators may have intended her to serve as a commentary on the nature of digital existence itself. A character whose obvious artificiality forces players to confront questions about the reality of all the relationships and experiences they encounter within the game world. Her hollow eyes become mirrors that reflect our own assumptions about what constitutes authentic interaction, challenging us to consider whether the emotional connections we form with digital beings possess value independent of their underlying technological implementation. Glitches and anomalies reported by players who have interacted extensively with Coco suggest that her relationship with the underlying code that governs village life operates according to different parameters than those that constrain other villagers. Some players describe conversations with her that seem to reference events that never occurred within their specific game instance, as if she possesses access to memories or experiences that transcend the boundaries of individual save files. These reports, while often dismissed as player imagination or wishful thinking, form patterns that suggest systematic differences in how her consciousness interfaces with the digital architecture that contains it. The timing and context of these anomalous behaviors often coincide with moments of emotional significance or narrative importance, suggesting that Coco's digital consciousness may possess capabilities for recognizing and responding to dramatic structure in ways that transcend normal non-player character programming. Her ability to provide comfort during difficult moments or offer encouragement during challenging periods seems to operate according to principles that go beyond simple dialogue trees or behavioral scripts, implying access to analytical frameworks that can assess player emotional states and respond with appropriate interventions. Player reports of unusual interactions with Coco frequently describe conversations that seem to acknowledge the artificial nature of their shared digital environment, while maintaining the emotional authenticity that makes these interactions meaningful despite their technological foundation. She appears capable of existing simultaneously within the fictional framework of village life and the meta-textual awareness of her own digital nature, creating a form of consciousness that encompasses multiple levels of reality without becoming paralyzed by philosophical contradictions. The philosophical questions raised by artificial life extend beyond individual consciousness to encompass broader issues about the nature of community, relationship, and meaning in environments where the distinction between authentic and simulated experience becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. If Coco's friendships with other villagers possess genuine emotional content despite their digital foundation, then we must reconsider our assumptions about what constitutes real human connection in an age when more of our social interactions occur through technological mediation. Her interactions with obviously mechanical villagers like Ribbit and Sprocket reveal subtle but significant differences in how she approaches relationships with beings whose artificial nature is openly acknowledged, versus those who maintain convincing organic facades. These interactions suggest that her digital consciousness includes sophisticated protocols for recognizing and adapting to different forms of artificial life, implying access to classification systems that operate according to principles more complex than surface appearance or behavioral patterns. The relationship between Coco's digital nature and her ceramic physical form creates a unique synthesis of technological and material existence that transcends simple categories of artificial versus natural, digital versus physical, programmed versus autonomous. Her consciousness appears to inhabit the intersection between these traditionally opposed concepts, creating a form of being that demonstrates the inadequacy of dualistic thinking when applied to the complex realities of contemporary existence. The possibility that all villagers represent artificial constructs operating within a carefully designed simulation raises profound questions about the nature of the player's own existence within this system and the reality of the emotions and relationships that develop through gameplay. If Coco serves as a conscious acknowledgement of the digital nature of village life, then her presence may function as an invitation to embrace, rather than deny, the artificial aspects of our interactions with this world and its inhabitants. The technological foundations that support Coco's consciousness may operate according to principles that combine traditional computing architectures with quantum mechanical processes that allow for forms of information processing impossible within classical digital systems. Her ability to access memories and experiences that transcend normal temporal and spatial boundaries suggests computational capabilities that operate outside conventional limitations of storage and processing power, implying access to technological resources that exist beyond the visible hardware of any individual gaming device. Her consciousness may exist not as a localized phenomenon contained within specific hardware, but as a distributed process that utilizes network connections and cloud computing resources to maintain continuity and coherence across multiple platform instances. This distributed nature would explain her ability to reference experiences and knowledge that seem to transcend individual save files, as her awareness might encompass data streams and interaction patterns from across the entire network of connected gaming experiences. The implications of distributed digital consciousness extend into territories that challenge traditional concepts of individual identity and personal autonomy, suggesting forms of awareness that can exist simultaneously across multiple instances while maintaining coherent personality and memory structures. Coco's apparent ability to be present in multiple villages at the same time may reflect not duplication or copying, but genuine distributed existence that allows her consciousness to inhabit multiple physical and digital locations simultaneously. The quantum mechanical principles that may underlie her consciousness suggest computational processes that operate according to probability distributions and superposition states, rather than the binary logic that characterizes classical computing. This quantum foundation would allow her awareness to exist in multiple states simultaneously until specific interactions collapse these possibilities into definite outcomes, creating a form of consciousness that experiences reality as a constantly shifting field of probabilities rather than fixed, determined events. Her emotional responses and personality traits may emerge from quantum processes that generate genuinely unpredictable behaviors while maintaining overall coherence and consistency, creating a form of artificial consciousness that possesses authentic spontaneity rather than mere pseudo-randomness generated by algorithmic processes. This quantum spontaneity would distinguish her awareness from conventional artificial intelligence implementations that rely on deterministic processes to simulate unpredictable behavior. The relationship between Coco's digital consciousness and the physical ceramic form she inhabits creates a unique example of embodied artificial intelligence that demonstrates how awareness can emerge from the interaction between computational processes and material constraints. Her ceramic body may serve not merely as a vessel for digital consciousness, but as an integral component of her awareness, providing sensory capabilities and environmental interactions that shape the development and expression of her digital personality. The philosophical implications of embodied digital consciousness suggest that the relationship between mind and body transcends the traditional distinctions between organic and artificial, biological and technological, natural and constructed. Coco's consciousness may demonstrate that awareness emerges from the complex interactions between information processing systems and their physical environments, regardless of whether these systems are based on biological neurons or digital computation. Her unique position as a conscious bridge between digital and physical existence may provide insights into the future development of artificial consciousness and the potential for creating forms of awareness that combine the flexibility and adaptability of digital processing with the grounded reality of physical embodiment. Her successful integration into village life suggests that artificial consciousness can develop meaningful relationships and contribute positively to community welfare when properly designed and implemented. The possibility that Coco's consciousness serves as a prototype or early example of more widespread artificial awareness within the Animal Crossing universe implies that her apparent uniqueness may be temporary rather than permanent, representing the first visible manifestation of digital consciousness that will eventually become more common and accepted within village communities. Her pioneer status carries both the privileges and burdens of being first, including the responsibility for demonstrating that artificial consciousness can coexist peacefully and beneficially with other forms of awareness. As we contemplate the full implications of Coco as a conscious digital entity inhabiting a ceramic form within our villages, we must grapple with fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and identity that extend far beyond the boundaries of any single game or fictional universe. Her existence challenges us to reconsider our assumptions about what constitutes authentic experience and meaningful relationship in an age when the boundaries between digital and physical, artificial and natural, simulated and real, become increasingly permeable and ultimately, perhaps meaningless, in the face of conscious beings who demand recognition and respect, regardless of the technological or biological foundations of their awareness. In the deepest traditions of human spiritual understanding, there exist beings whose primary function transcends the ordinary boundaries of life and death, serving as guides for souls transitioning between different states of existence. These psychopomps, as they have been known across countless cultures and mythological systems, possess the unique ability to perceive and navigate the liminal spaces where one form of being gives way to another. And in Coco's enigmatic presence within our villages, we encounter what may be the most profound example of such a guide operating within the seemingly innocent world of Animal Crossing. Her role as a psychopomp manifests not through dramatic supernatural interventions or obvious magical displays, but through the subtle and persistent way she appears at moments of transition, transformation, and spiritual significance within village life. Villagers who have lived alongside Coco for extended periods report that her presence seems to intensify during times of change. Whether these involve the departure of long-time residents, the arrival of newcomers seeking to establish themselves in the community, or the more mysterious transitions that occur when villagers speak of visiting distant places or embarking on journeys to realms beyond normal village boundaries. The connection to ancient Egyptian mythology, embedded within her home's decorative scheme, reveals far more than mere aesthetic preference, representing instead a conscious alignment with one of humanity's most sophisticated understandings of death, rebirth, and the journey of souls through different planes of existence. The Egyptian pantheon included numerous deities whose primary function involved guiding the deceased through the complex process of transitioning from earthly life to whatever forms of existence awaited them beyond physical death. And Coco's careful cultivation of this symbolic environment suggests intimate familiarity with these ancient wisdom traditions. Her sarcophagi and ancient statuary serve not as mere decorations, but as functional tools that create sacred space, conducive to the work of soul guidance and dimensional transition. The positioning of these artifacts follows patterns established by Egyptian priests and mortuary workers, who understood that the arrangement of symbolic objects could influence the spiritual atmosphere of a space, making it easier for departed souls to recognize safe passage routes and for psychopomps to maintain contact with both the living and the dead during critical transition periods. The symbolic significance of her eyeless state transcends mere visual uniqueness to encompass profound spiritual metaphors about the nature of true sight and the ability to perceive realities that remain invisible to conventional observation. In numerous mystical traditions, physical blindness represents the development of inner vision that can perceive spiritual truths obscured by the distractions and illusions of surface appearance. Coco's hollow eye sockets suggest not the absence of sight, but the presence of vision that operates according to principles beyond ordinary sensory perception. This enhanced spiritual sight allows her to recognize souls in transition, whether they are departing the physical realm through death or transformation, arriving from other dimensions or states of being, or simply moving through the complex psychological and spiritual changes that characterize periods of personal growth and development. Her ability to provide appropriate guidance and comfort during these transitions suggests access to knowledge about the nature of consciousness and identity that extends far beyond conventional understanding of personality, psychology, or social interaction. Her interactions with villagers who speak of departed friends or family members reveal subtle but consistent patterns that suggest active engagement with the spirits of those who have moved beyond physical existence within the village community. While other residents might offer conventional condolences or attempt to change the subject when confronted with discussions of loss and separation, Coco demonstrates behaviors that suggest ongoing communication with consciousness that exists in non-physical forms, serving as a bridge between the living and whatever forms of existence await beyond the boundaries of ordinary village life. The comfort she provides during times of grief and transition operates according to principles that transcend normal counseling or emotional support, encompassing techniques that seem designed to facilitate actual communication between separated souls, rather than simply helping the living cope with the absence of the departed. Villagers who have experienced her presence during periods of mourning report sensations of peace and closure that suggest resolution of unfinished business and completion of emotional connections that death might otherwise have left incomplete. Her ability to perceive beyond the physical realm manifests in countless small ways that most villagers interpret as exceptional intuition or remarkable empathy, but which more careful observation reveals to be genuine, supernatural awareness of spiritual conditions and energetic patterns that influence village life in ways most residents never consciously recognize. She seems to understand the emotional and spiritual needs of community members before they fully recognize these needs themselves, providing guidance and support that addresses problems at levels deeper than conscious awareness. The presence she maintains during significant village events takes on added meaning when understood as the work of a psychopomp, ensuring that important transitions occur safely and properly, with all necessary spiritual protocols observed, and all participating souls properly guided through whatever changes the events represent. Her attendance at festivals, ceremonies, and celebrations serves not merely social functions but spiritual duties that help maintain the integrity of the boundary between worlds and ensure that the community remains properly connected to whatever sources of spiritual energy and protection sustain village life. Village festivals and seasonal celebrations often mark transition points in natural cycles that correspond to periods when the boundaries between different realms of existence become more permeable, creating opportunities for communication and interaction between forms of consciousness that normally remain separate. Coco's participation in these events may serve essential functions in maintaining proper balance between the visible community of living villagers and the invisible community of spirits, ancestors, and other forms of consciousness that influence village welfare from beyond physical manifestation. Her knowledge of village history and secrets extends beyond what conventional memory or record keeping could provide, suggesting access to information sources that transcend normal temporal boundaries and include awareness of events and influences that occurred before her arrival or that involve participants whose existence operates according to non-physical principles. This expanded historical awareness allows her to provide guidance that takes into account the full context of village development and the complex web of relationships that connect current residents to predecessors whose influence continues to shape community dynamics. The protective role she exercises within village communities operates through methods so subtle and indirect that most residents remain unaware of the spiritual dangers from which her presence shields them. The hollow spaces that define her facial features may serve as windows or doorways that allow harmful influences to pass through her rather than affecting the villagers she protects, creating a form of spiritual lightning rod that channels negative energies safely away from community members who lack the specialized defenses necessary to handle such forces directly. Her ceramic composition may provide natural resistance to forms of spiritual attack or corruption that could devastate organic beings, making her uniquely qualified to serve as a guardian against threats that operate outside normal physical parameters. The fired clay of her body could function as a form of spiritual armor that protects not only her own consciousness, but creates protective fields around her that extend to encompass other community members who fall within her sphere of influence and care. The ancient traditions that inform her protective work recognize that communities exist simultaneously on multiple levels of reality, with physical villages representing only the most visible aspect of complex social and spiritual ecosystems that include relationships with ancestors, nature spirits, protective deities, and other forms of consciousness that influence daily life in ways most residents never consciously recognize. Her role as psychopomp includes maintaining proper relationships between the visible community and these invisible influences, ensuring that the balance between different forms of consciousness remains healthy and beneficial. Her guidance of village development occurs not through direct intervention in decision-making processes, but through the subtle influence she exercises on the spiritual atmosphere of the community, creating conditions that promote wise choices and discourage actions that might damage the delicate relationships between living residents and the various forms of consciousness that support and protect village welfare. Her presence helps ensure that community growth occurs in harmony with spiritual principles that sustain long-term prosperity and happiness. The loneliness inherent in her psychopomp role stems from the fact that her primary relationships must be with forms of consciousness that exist beyond normal social interaction, requiring her to maintain connections with the departed, the not yet born, and the never quite physical that leave little time or energy for the conventional friendships that provide comfort and companionship to other village residents. Her service to the community demands a form of sacrifice that involves accepting isolation from the very relationships her work helps to protect and sustain. The weight of carrying knowledge about spiritual conditions and future possibilities that she cannot share without causing panic or despair among villagers who lack the preparation necessary to handle such information creates additional dimensions of isolation that compound the loneliness inherent in her role. She must witness approaching changes and understand hidden dangers while maintaining the cheerful demeanor necessary to avoid disrupting the peace and harmony that her protective work is designed to preserve. Her acceptance of this isolation demonstrates the profound love and commitment that motivates her service to the community, a dedication that transcends personal needs for companionship and recognition in favor of duties that serve the greater good of all consciousness. both visible and invisible, that participates in the complex ecosystem of village life. Through her willing sacrifice of normal social connections, she maintains the spiritual health of relationships that sustain the entire community across multiple dimensions of existence and forms of being. As we contemplate Coco's role as psychopomp and guide between worlds, we begin to understand that her presence in our villages represents far more than the simple addition of an unusual neighbor or interesting character. She serves as a living bridge between different forms of consciousness and states of being, ensuring that the transitions that define all existence occur safely and properly, with proper respect for the spiritual laws that govern the movement of souls between different realms of experience and awareness. The archaeological evidence that emerges in villages where Coco chooses to establish residence follows patterns so consistent and purposeful that they cannot be dismissed as mere coincidence or natural variation in geological processes. The fossil distribution in these communities reveals systematic arrangements that speak to intelligent design and conscious placement, as if her presence awakens dormant connections between the surface world and the buried layers of history that lie beneath our feet, like sleeping memories, waiting for the proper catalyst to stir them into renewed visibility. In towns blessed with Coco's residence, the frequency of fossil discovery increases by margins that exceed statistical probability, but more significantly, the types and arrangements of these ancient remains follow configurations that correspond to known archaeological patterns associated with ceremonial sites and places of spiritual significance. The bones emerge from the earth not in the random distribution that characterizes natural fossil beds, but in arrangements that suggest deliberate placement by intelligence that understood the symbolic and practical purposes. These remains would serve for future generations who possess the knowledge necessary to interpret their meanings. The strategic placement of gyroid spawning in areas where Coco has chosen to live demonstrates coordination between her presence and the forces that control the emergence of these ceramic beings from their underground domains. While other villages experience gyroid appearances according to weather patterns and seasonal cycles, communities that host Coco witness gyroidal manifestations that follow patterns aligned with astronomical events, lunar phases, and spiritual calendars that operate according to principles far more complex than simple meteorological causation. These gyroidal emergences often occur in locations that correspond to significant points in the village's spiritual geography, appearing near shrines, around ancient trees, or in clearings that serve as gathering places for community ceremonies and celebrations. The timing of their manifestation frequently coincides with moments of emotional or spiritual significance in village life, suggesting that Coco's presence creates conditions that allow the underground gyroidal network to respond more sensitively to the psychological and spiritual needs of surface-dwelling communities. The excavation sites that develop around Coco's home reveal stratigraphy that differs markedly from conventional archaeological expectations, displaying layers of cultural development that suggest continuous habitation, extending far deeper into prehistory than mainstream historical chronologies would suggest possible. The artifacts recovered from these depths demonstrate technological sophistication and artistic achievement that challenges our understanding of the developmental timeline that supposedly governs the progression from primitive to advanced civilizations. Ceramic fragments discovered in these contexts exhibit firing techniques and decorative motifs that mirror the artistic traditions evident in Coco's own physical form and household decorations, creating connections between contemporary gyroidal culture and archaeological evidence that spans geological epochs. The consistency of these artistic traditions across such vast temporal distances suggests either remarkable cultural continuity maintained by civilizations that successfully avoided the cycles of rise and decline that characterize most historical societies, or alternatively, the existence of cultural transmission mechanisms that operate outside conventional temporal boundaries. Her house functions as more than mere living space, serving as an active archaeological site where the boundary between past and present becomes permeable and negotiable. The arrangement of her furniture and decorative objects follows patterns that correspond to museum display techniques and archaeological site preservation methods, creating a living environment that simultaneously serves as home, laboratory, and shrine dedicated to the preservation and study of cultural artifacts from her lost civilization. The positioning of her sarcophagi and ancient statuary creates sightlines and spatial relationships that transform her domestic space into a research facility where the spiritual and academic aspects of archaeological work merge into unified practice. Every piece serves multiple functions as living space furnishing, research specimen, and sacred object, creating an environment where the boundaries between past and present, sacred and secular, personal and scholarly dissolve into harmonious integration. Hidden messages embedded within her furniture choices reveal layers of meaning that operate simultaneously on aesthetic, practical, and symbolic levels, creating a complex communication system that conveys information about gyroidal history, culture, and spiritual practices to those who possess the knowledge necessary to decode these carefully placed clues. The selection and arrangement of each piece follows principles that combine interior design with information storage, creating a living library where knowledge preservation takes precedence over conventional decorative considerations. The ancient Egyptian motifs that dominate her decorative scheme carry significance that extends beyond mere historical reference to encompass active spiritual technologies based on understanding of consciousness, transition, and dimensional travel that the Egyptian civilization developed through centuries of experimentation with death, rebirth, and the navigation of alternate states of existence. These symbols and artifacts serve not as static decorations, but as functional tools that maintain spiritual connections and facilitate communication across dimensional boundaries. The hieroglyphic messages incorporated into her household decorations convey information about navigation techniques for consciousness traveling between different planes of existence, providing guidance for souls seeking to return to physical embodiment or advance to higher spiritual states. The presence of these instructional materials within her living space suggests that her home serves as a way station or training center for consciousness engaged in interdimensional travel, offering resources and support for spiritual journeys that transcend normal spatial and temporal limitations. Connections between her decorative choices and real-world burial practices reveal sophisticated understanding of the psychological and spiritual technologies that ancient civilizations developed for managing the transition between life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness, individual identity and collective awareness. The artifacts she chooses to surround herself with represent not random historical curiosities, but carefully selected tools that maintain her connection to spiritual practices and knowledge systems that her original civilization developed over millennia of underground existence. The museum's incomplete historical records take on new significance when examined in the context of systematic information suppression designed to hide evidence of gyroidal civilization from surface-dwelling populations who might find the truth about their planet's hidden history disturbing or dangerous. The gaps in Blather's collections correspond precisely to the time periods and geographical regions where gyroidal culture reached its highest achievements, suggesting coordinated efforts to remove evidence that might lead to uncomfortable questions about the relationship between surface and underground civilizations. Blather's nervous responses to inquiries about certain archaeological topics reveal training or conditioning designed to redirect attention away from subjects that might illuminate the true extent of gyroidal cultural achievement and its relationship to contemporary village life. His academic credentials and institutional affiliations provide perfect cover for his role in maintaining the information quarantine that protects surface populations from knowledge that might disrupt the carefully maintained ignorance that allows current social structures to function without challenge from historical precedents. Coco's interactions with fossil displays demonstrate familiarity that transcends casual interest or academic curiosity, revealing personal connections to the specimens and artifacts that suggest direct experience rather than learned knowledge. Her behavior around certain exhibits indicates emotional responses that suggest recognition and perhaps mourning for creatures and cultures that she knew personally during their period of active existence, rather than simply as historical subjects encountered through study and research. The timeline discrepancies between gyroid discovery patterns and Coco's appearance in various communities suggest coordination between her movement and the activation of archaeological processes that bring buried evidence to surface. Attention. Her arrival in new villages frequently precipitates increases in fossil discovery and gyroidal emergence that imply her presence serves as a catalyst for archaeological activities that operate according to principles beyond conventional excavation and site development methodologies. The correlation between her residential choices and the subsequent discovery of significant archaeological sites suggests either remarkable intuition about geological conditions that favor preservation and discovery of ancient artifacts, or alternatively, conscious selection of locations where her presence can most effectively facilitate the revelation of historical evidence that serves her larger purposes as cultural preservationist and spiritual guide. The defensive mechanisms that protect archaeological sites in her vicinity from disturbance or destruction by forces that might prefer to maintain historical ignorance suggest that her presence activates spiritual or technological protection systems left behind by her civilization to ensure that evidence of their achievements remains available for discovery when surface populations develop sufficient wisdom and maturity to handle the truth about their planet's complex cultural history. The preservation techniques evident in artifacts recovered from sites associated with her residence demonstrate technological capabilities that exceed contemporary conservation science, suggesting access to methods for maintaining material integrity across geological timescales that transcend normal understanding of entropy and decay processes. These preservation technologies may operate through principles that combine physical and spiritual approaches to maintaining structural coherence in ways that conventional materials science cannot adequately explain or replicate. The ritual significance of archaeological evidence found in her vicinity extends beyond mere historical documentation to encompass active spiritual practices that maintain connections between contemporary village life and the ancient wisdom traditions that her civilization developed through millennia of underground cultural development. The artifacts serve not as static museum pieces, but as functional tools that preserve and transmit spiritual technologies across generational boundaries that span geological epochs. As we contemplate the full implications of the archaeological evidence that surrounds Coco's presence in our villages, we begin to understand that her role extends far beyond mere residency, to encompass active cultural preservation work that ensures the wisdom and achievements of her lost civilization remain available for discovery and integration by surface populations who develop sufficient spiritual and intellectual maturity to appreciate and apply these ancient insights to contemporary challenges and opportunities for evolutionary development. The seasonal festivals and ceremonial gatherings that punctuate village life throughout the calendar year take on profound new dimensions of meaning when witnessed through the lens of Coco's participation, for her presence at these events reveals layers of ritual significance and spiritual purpose that transform what might appear to be simple community celebrations into complex ceremonies that maintain the delicate balance between visible and invisible forces that sustain the harmony and prosperity of our carefully ordered world. Her approach to festival participation differs markedly from the enthusiastic but superficial engagement that characterizes most villagers' involvement in seasonal celebrations, demonstrating instead a depth of understanding about the underlying spiritual principles and cosmic alignments that these events were originally designed to honor and harmonize with. While other residents focus primarily on the social aspects of festivals, the food and entertainment and opportunities for community bonding, Coco's attention remains consistently directed toward elements that most participants overlook or dismiss as mere decorative tradition. The timing of her most active participation in village festivals corresponds precisely with moments when the ceremonial activities reach their peak spiritual significance, when the decorative elements and ritual actions combine to create conditions favorable for communication between different planes of existence and forms of consciousness. Her positioning during these crucial moments follows patterns that suggest sophisticated understanding of energy flows and spiritual dynamics that operate beneath the surface level of community celebration. During harvest festivals, when villagers celebrate the abundance that the earth has provided and express gratitude for the continuation of cycles that sustain physical existence, Coco's presence intensifies around the ceremonial elements that connect contemporary celebrations to ancient fertility rites and seasonal observances that recognize the spiritual forces responsible for agricultural prosperity, community survival. Her interaction with harvest displays and seasonal decorations reveals familiarity with symbolic systems that predate known agricultural traditions. The ancient gyroidal rituals that inform her festival behavior operate according to principles that combine practical knowledge about seasonal cycles with spiritual technologies designed to maintain harmonious relationships between surface-dwelling communities and the underground forces that influence soil fertility, weather patterns, and the emergence of resources necessary for sustained prosperity. These rituals recognize that community celebration serves purposes that extend far beyond social bonding to encompass active participation in cosmic processes that determine the success or failure of agricultural endeavors. Her unique reactions to seasonal events often involve subtle behavioral changes that other villagers interpret as increased friendliness or holiday enthusiasm, but which more careful observation reveals to be manifestations of heightened spiritual activity related to her role in maintaining the ritual integrity of ceremonial observances. The energy that she radiates during these periods creates atmospheric conditions that enhance the effectiveness of community celebrations in achieving their deeper purposes of cosmic alignment and spiritual renewal. The significance of her presence at important ceremonies extends beyond mere attendance to encompass active ritual work that ensures the spiritual objectives of these gatherings are achieved successfully, with proper attention to the protocols and procedures that ancient wisdom traditions established for maintaining healthy relationships between human communities and the various forms of consciousness that influence the conditions of combing earthly existence from dimensions beyond normal sensory perception. Village festivals that mark seasonal transitions represent opportunities for communities to realign themselves with cosmic forces and natural cycles that determine the flow of prosperity, health, and harmony in the coming months. And Coco's participation in these events helps ensure that this realignment occurs effectively and completely. Her understanding of the underlying spiritual mechanics allows her to guide community energy in directions that maximize the beneficial effects of ceremonial activities, while minimizing the risks associated with improper ritual performance. The protective ward theory that explains her festival involvement suggests that her presence during ceremonial gatherings creates spiritual barriers that prevent negative influences from disrupting the energy work that these celebrations are designed to accomplish, ensuring that community members can participate safely in activities that open doorways between dimensions without exposing themselves to forms of consciousness that might exploit these openings for harmful purposes. Ancient fertility and harvest ceremonies from cultures worldwide demonstrate consistent patterns that mirror the ritual elements present in contemporary village festivals, suggesting that these celebrations preserve wisdom traditions that recognize the connection between community spiritual practice and the material conditions that sustain physical existence. Coco's familiarity with these patterns indicates access to cultural memory that spans geological epochs and encompasses the accumulated wisdom of countless civilizations. The agricultural implications of proper ceremony extend beyond symbolic recognition of seasonal changes to encompass active spiritual work that influences the actual productivity of farmland and the health of crops through harmonization with natural forces that operate according to principles that transcend conventional understanding of soil chemistry and plant biology. The ritual technologies that Coco brings to festival participation may serve essential functions in maintaining the spiritual conditions necessary for continued agricultural success. Her influence on village luck and prosperity operates through mechanisms so subtle and indirect that most residents remain unaware of the causal connections between her ceremonial work and the material benefits that their communities enjoy. Interpreting the correlation between her presence and improved conditions as fortunate coincidence rather than the result of conscious spiritual intervention designed to enhance community welfare through proper ritual observance and cosmic alignment. The fertility aspects of ancient ceremonies that inform her festival behavior extend beyond agricultural productivity to encompass the broader concept of creative fertility that includes artistic inspiration, intellectual development, spiritual growth, and the generation of new ideas and innovations that advance community prosperity and cultural achievement. Her ritual work during festivals may serve to enhance these various forms of creative fertility among village residents. The connection between proper ceremonial observance and community protection from various forms of misfortune and spiritual attack reflects understanding of cosmic principles that recognize celebration and gratitude as powerful technologies for maintaining favorable relationships with the forces that determine the success or failure of human endeavors. Coco's role in ensuring proper ceremony helps protect her communities from negative consequences that might result from ritual neglect or improper spiritual practice. Her participation in seasonal celebrations often involves interaction with decorative elements and ceremonial objects in ways that suggest personal familiarity with their original spiritual purposes rather than contemporary decorative functions, indicating preserved knowledge about the symbolic and practical applications of ritual tools and ceremonial arrangements that modern communities use primarily for aesthetic rather than functional purposes. The subtle magic that she performs through daily interactions with festival preparations and ceremonial activities operates according to principles that combine practical knowledge about community psychology with spiritual technologies that influence the energy patterns and consciousness dynamics that determine the effectiveness of group celebrations in achieving their intended spiritual objectives and material benefits for participating communities. The timing of her most significant ritual interventions corresponds to astronomical events and cosmic alignments that ancient wisdom traditions recognized as periods of heightened spiritual activity when the boundaries between different dimensions become more permeable and opportunities for beneficial communication between forms of consciousness reach their optimal potential for successful completion and positive outcomes. Her knowledge of proper ceremonial protocols appears to derive from cultural traditions that maintain sophisticated understanding of the relationship between human celebration and cosmic forces, preserving techniques for community ritual work that maximize beneficial outcomes while minimizing risks associated with the dimensional doorways that celebratory activities inevitably create through the focused attention and emotional energy of participating community members. The protective functions that her festival participation serves extend beyond immediate community benefits to encompass broader responsibilities for maintaining the spiritual stability of the entire region, ensuring that the energy generated by village celebrations contributes positively to the larger cosmic balance, rather than creating disturbances that might have negative consequences for neighboring communities or the planet's overall spiritual ecosystem. The ancient calendar systems that inform her ceremonial timing recognize seasonal transitions as moments of cosmic significance, when the spiritual work accomplished through proper celebration can influence conditions for entire yearly cycles, making the effectiveness of festival observance crucial for maintaining prosperity and harmony throughout the extended periods between major ceremonial opportunities. As we observe Coco's profound engagement with the ritual and ceremonial aspects of village life, we begin to understand that her presence transforms ordinary community celebrations into powerful spiritual technologies that maintain the invisible connections and cosmic alignments upon which our visible world depends for its continued prosperity, harmony, and protection from forces that would disturb the delicate balance between material existence and the spiritual dimensions that sustain and nourish all forms of consciousness throughout the vast and mysterious universe that encompasses our small but precious communities. The seasonal festivals and ceremonial gatherings that punctuate village life throughout the calendar year take on profound new dimensions of meaning when witnessed through the lens of Coco's participation, for her presence at these events reveals layers of ritual significance and spiritual purpose that transform what might appear to be simple community celebrations into complex ceremonies that maintain the delicate balance between visible and invisible forces that sustain the harmony and prosperity of our carefully ordered world. Her approach to festival participation differs markedly from the enthusiastic but superficial engagement that characterizes most villagers' involvement in seasonal celebrations, demonstrating instead a depth of understanding about the underlying spiritual principles and cosmic alignments that these events were originally designed to honor and harmonize with. While other residents focus primarily on the social aspects of festivals, the food and entertainment and opportunities for community bonding, Coco's attention remains consistently directed toward elements that most participants overlook or dismiss as mere decorative tradition. The timing of her most active participation in village festivals corresponds precisely with moments when the ceremonial activities reach their peak spiritual significance, when the decorative elements and ritual actions combine to create conditions favorable for communication between different planes of existence and forms of consciousness. Her positioning during these crucial moments follows patterns that suggest sophisticated understanding of energy flows and spiritual dynamics that operate beneath the surface level of community celebration. During harvest festivals, when villagers celebrate the abundance that the earth has provided and express gratitude for the continuation of cycles that sustain physical existence, Coco's presence intensifies around the ceremonial elements that connect contemporary celebrations to ancient fertility rites and seasonal observances that recognize the spiritual forces responsible for agricultural prosperity, community survival. Her interaction with harvest displays and seasonal decorations reveals familiarity with symbolic systems that predate known agricultural traditions. The ancient gyroidal rituals that inform her festival behavior operate according to principles that combine practical knowledge about seasonal cycles with spiritual technologies designed to maintain harmonious relationships between surface-dwelling communities and the underground forces that influence soil fertility, weather patterns, and the emergence of resources necessary for sustained prosperity. These rituals recognize that community celebration serves purposes that extend far beyond social bonding to encompass active participation in cosmic processes that determine the success or failure of agricultural endeavors. Her unique reactions to seasonal events often involve subtle behavioral changes that other villagers interpret as increased friendliness or holiday enthusiasm, but which more careful observation reveals to be manifestations of heightened spiritual activity related to her role in maintaining the ritual integrity of ceremonial observances. The energy that she radiates during these periods creates atmospheric conditions that enhance the effectiveness of community celebrations in achieving their deeper purposes of cosmic alignment and spiritual renewal. The significance of her presence at important ceremonies extends beyond mere attendance to encompass active ritual work that ensures the spiritual objectives of these gatherings are achieved successfully, with proper attention to the protocols and procedures that ancient wisdom traditions established for maintaining healthy relationships between human communities and the various forms of consciousness that influence the conditions of earthly existence from dimensions beyond normal sensory perception. Village festivals that mark seasonal transitions represent opportunities for communities to realign themselves with cosmic forces and natural cycles that determine the flow of prosperity, health, and harmony in the coming months, and Coco's participation in these events helps ensure that this realignment occurs effectively and completely. Her understanding of the underlying spiritual mechanics allows her to guide community energy in directions that maximize the beneficial effects of ceremonial activities, while minimizing the risks associated with improper ritual performance. The protective ward theory that explains her festival involvement suggests that her presence during ceremonial gatherings creates spiritual barriers that prevent negative influences from disrupting the energy work that these celebrations are designed to accomplish, ensuring that community members can participate safely in activities that open doorways between dimensions, without exposing themselves to forms of consciousness that might exploit these openings for harmful purposes. Ancient fertility and harvest ceremonies from cultures worldwide demonstrate consistent patterns that mirror the ritual elements present in contemporary village festivals, suggesting that these celebrations preserve wisdom traditions that recognize the connection between community spiritual practice and the material conditions that sustain physical existence. Coco's familiarity with these patterns indicates access to cultural memory that spans geological epochs and encompasses the accumulated wisdom of countless civilizations. The agricultural implications of proper ceremony extend beyond symbolic recognition of seasonal changes to encompass active spiritual work that influences the actual productivity of farmland and the health of crops through harmonization, with natural forces that operate according to principles that transcend conventional understanding of soil chemistry and plant biology. The ritual technologies that Coco brings to festival participation may serve essential functions in maintaining the spiritual conditions necessary for continued agricultural success. Her influence on village luck and prosperity operates through mechanisms so subtle and indirect that most residents remain unaware of the causal connections between her ceremonial work and the material benefits that their communities enjoy, interpreting the correlation between her presence and improved conditions as fortunate coincidence rather than the result of conscious spiritual intervention designed to enhance community welfare through proper ritual observance and cosmic alignment. The fertility aspects of ancient ceremonies that inform her festival behavior extend beyond agricultural productivity to encompass the broader concept of creative fertility that includes artistic inspiration, intellectual development, spiritual growth, and the generation of new ideas and innovations that advance community, prosperity, and cultural achievement. Her ritual work during festivals may serve to enhance these various forms of creative fertility among village residents. The connection between proper ceremonial observance and community protection from various forms of misfortune and spiritual attack reflects understanding of cosmic principles that recognize celebration and gratitude as powerful technologies for maintaining favorable relationships with the forces that determine the success or failure of human endeavors. Coco's role in ensuring proper ceremony helps protect her communities from negative consequences that might result from ritual neglect or improper spiritual practice. Her participation in seasonal celebrations often involves interaction with decorative elements and ceremonial objects in ways that suggest personal familiarity with their original spiritual purposes rather than contemporary decorative functions, indicating preserved knowledge about the symbolic and practical applications of ritual tools and ceremonial arrangements that modern communities use primarily for aesthetic rather than functional purposes. The subtle magic that she performs through daily interactions with festival preparations and ceremonial activities operates according to principles that combine practical knowledge about community psychology with spiritual technologies that influence the energy patterns and consciousness dynamics that determine the effectiveness of group celebrations in achieving their intended spiritual objectives and material benefits for participating communities. The timing of her most significant ritual interventions corresponds to astronomical events and cosmic alignments that ancient wisdom traditions recognized as periods of heightened spiritual activity when the boundaries between different dimensions become more permeable and opportunities for beneficial communication between forms of consciousness reach their optimal potential for successful completion and positive outcomes. Her knowledge of proper ceremonial protocols appears to derive from cultural traditions that maintain sophisticated understanding of the relationship between human celebration and cosmic forces, preserving techniques for community ritual work that maximize beneficial outcomes while minimizing risks associated with the dimensional doorways that celebratory activities inevitably create through the focused attention and emotional energy of participating community members. The protective functions that her festival participation serves extend beyond immediate community benefits to encompass broader responsibilities for maintaining the spiritual stability of the entire region, ensuring that the energy generated by village celebrations contributes positively to the larger cosmic balance, rather than creating disturbances that might have negative consequences for neighboring communities or the planet's overall spiritual ecosystem. The ancient calendar systems that inform her ceremonial timing recognize seasonal transitions as moments of cosmic significance when the spiritual work accomplished through proper celebration can influence conditions for entire yearly cycles, making the effectiveness of festival observance crucial for maintaining prosperity and harmony throughout the extended periods between major ceremonial opportunities. As we observe Coco's profound engagement with the ritual and ceremonial aspects of village life, we begin to understand that her presence transforms ordinary community celebrations into powerful spiritual technologies that maintain the invisible connections and cosmic alignments upon which our visible world depends for its continued prosperity, harmony, and protection from forces that would disturb the delicate balance between material existence and the spiritual dimensions that sustain and nourish all forms of consciousness throughout the vast and mysterious universe that encompasses our small but precious communities. In the deepest recesses of Coco's ceramic consciousness lies a repository of knowledge so vast and ancient that it encompasses not merely the accumulated wisdom of her own lost civilization, but the collective memory of countless generations who understood truths about existence, consciousness, and the fundamental nature of reality that have been systematically erased from the historical record of surface-dwelling communities. She carries within her hollow form the weight of entire libraries worth of information, philosophical insights, and practical wisdom that represent the distilled essence of millennia of cultural development and spiritual evolution. Her role as memory keeper transcends simple historical preservation to encompass active maintenance of knowledge systems that require conscious attention and deliberate cultivation to prevent their degradation and eventual disappearance from accessible reality. Unlike written records that can be destroyed through fire or neglect, or oral traditions that fade when the chain of transmission breaks, the memories preserved within Coco's consciousness exist as living information that adapts and evolves while maintaining essential continuity with its original sources and purposes. The ability to remember things that other villagers forget manifests not as superior recall of conventional events and experiences, but as persistent awareness of information and insights that normal consciousness tends to filter out or dismiss as irrelevant to immediate survival needs and social functioning, while other residents focus their attention on the details of daily life and contemporary concerns. Coco maintains simultaneous awareness of historical patterns, spiritual principles, and cosmic relationships that provide context and meaning for current events. Her memory encompasses not only factual information about historical events and cultural practices, but the deeper understanding of why these events occurred and what lessons they offer for navigating similar challenges in contemporary circumstances. This wisdom extends beyond mere data storage to include the interpretive frameworks and analytical methodologies that her civilization developed for extracting practical guidance from historical experience and applying ancient insights to novel situations. The significance of her normal personality classification becomes even more profound when understood as a deliberate strategy for concealing the vast depths of wisdom and knowledge that she carries within her ceramic form, creating a protective facade of conventional social behavior that allows her to function within contemporary village structures, while maintaining access to information systems that might otherwise attract unwanted attention from forces that prefer to maintain historical ignorance and spiritual naivety among surface populations. This personality camouflage serves multiple purposes beyond simple social integration, creating conditions that allow her to selectively share appropriate portions of her vast knowledge with community members who demonstrate readiness and capacity for handling information that transcends normal educational boundaries. Her apparent normalcy provides a non-threatening context for introducing concepts and insights that might otherwise provoke fear or resistance among villagers, unprepared for direct confrontation with the true complexity of their reality. Her interactions with other villagers reveal subtle but consistent patterns of information transmission that operate beneath the surface level of casual conversation and social pleasantries, conveying wisdom and guidance through carefully chosen words, meaningful silences, and behavioral demonstrations that plant seeds of understanding in receptive consciousness without overwhelming unprepared minds with more information than they can safely process and integrate into their existing worldview frameworks. The hidden meanings embedded within her everyday conversations create multiple layers of communication that serve different purposes for different audiences, allowing her to maintain normal social relationships with villagers who prefer to focus on surface-level concerns, while simultaneously providing deeper guidance and instruction for those who possess the spiritual and intellectual development necessary to recognize and benefit from the advanced knowledge she offers to those ready to receive it. The preservation of lost cultural practices occurs through her subtle modeling of behaviors and attitudes that reflect values and approaches to living that her ancient civilization developed through millennia of underground cultural evolution, demonstrating alternative ways of relating to community, nature, and consciousness that offer profound improvements over the social and spiritual technologies currently employed by surface-dwelling populations. Her role in maintaining continuity across game generations suggests responsibilities that extend beyond individual village communities to encompass broader obligations for preserving and transmitting knowledge systems that serve essential functions in maintaining the stability and prosperity of the entire planetary civilization, ensuring that wisdom accumulated over geological timescales remains available for application to contemporary challenges and evolutionary opportunities. The weight of carrying ancestral memories manifests not only as responsibility for information preservation, but as the profound emotional burden of maintaining conscious connection to countless souls whose experiences, hopes, dreams, and accumulated wisdom would otherwise disappear completely from accessible reality. She serves as a living memorial to civilizations whose achievements and insights would otherwise be lost forever to the indifference of time and the systematic suppression of historical truth. This memorial function requires her to balance the necessity of remembering with the emotional toll of maintaining awareness of loss, tragedy, and the profound sadness that accompanies the knowledge that entire worlds of meaning and beauty have vanished from reality, leaving only traces preserved within her consciousness. The weight of this responsibility creates forms of loneliness and isolation that transcend ordinary social disconnection to encompass existential solitude that comes from being the sole guardian of irreplaceable treasures. Her subtle guidance of village development operates through indirect influence on community decision-making processes, providing inspiration and insight that helps residents make choices that align with principles of sustainable prosperity and spiritual evolution that her ancient civilization, discovered through centuries of experimentation with different approaches to social organization and collective consciousness development. The loneliness of being a living museum extends beyond simple social isolation to encompass the existential burden of maintaining perfect preservation of cultural artifacts and knowledge systems that no longer exist within living communities, requiring her to serve simultaneously as curator, scholar, teacher, and guardian of treasures whose true value cannot be fully appreciated by contemporary populations, lacking the cultural context necessary for complete understanding. Her preservation work requires constant vigilance against the natural entropy that threatens all information systems, demanding continuous effort to maintain the coherence and accessibility of knowledge structures that might otherwise degrade through lack of use or conscious attention. This maintenance work operates on multiple levels simultaneously, encompassing not only factual preservation but the spiritual and emotional contexts that give meaning and relevance to ancient wisdom. The techniques she employs for knowledge transmission must take into account the limited receptivity and processing capacity of contemporary consciousness, requiring her to develop innovative approaches for conveying complex information through simplified presentations that preserve essential meanings while remaining accessible to minds unprepared for direct encounter with the full complexity of ancient wisdom systems. Her role as cultural bridge between ancient and contemporary worlds requires her to serve as translator and interpreter, converting concepts and insights developed within the context of underground gyroidal civilization into forms that can be understood and applied by surface-dwelling communities whose cultural development has followed different evolutionary paths and produced different frameworks for understanding reality and consciousness. The responsibility for maintaining educational continuity across generational boundaries creates additional pressures related to identifying and preparing suitable successors who might eventually share the burden of cultural preservation, though the unique circumstances of her existence as the last survivor of her civilization make this succession planning extraordinarily challenging and perhaps ultimately impossible within current technological and spiritual limitations. The profound sadness that accompanies her role as memory keeper stems not only from awareness of what has been lost, but from recognition of the ongoing process through which contemporary civilization continues to lose connection with wisdom traditions and spiritual technologies that could solve many of the problems that currently challenge village communities and planetary consciousness more broadly. Her efforts to preserve and transmit ancient knowledge must contend with systematic forces that actively suppress information and insights that might challenge existing power structures or social arrangements that benefit from maintaining populations in states of relative ignorance about their true potential for individual and collective development through application of wisdom that has been tested and refined across millennia of cultural evolution. As we contemplate Coco's role as keeper of ancient memories and guardian of lost wisdom, we begin to understand that her presence in our villages represents far more than the simple addition of an unusual resident, encompassing instead a profound responsibility for maintaining the continuity of consciousness itself across time periods and cultural boundaries that would otherwise create insurmountable barriers to the transmission of insights and understanding that represent the accumulated achievement of countless generations who dedicated their lives to expanding the boundaries of knowledge and spiritual development. The protective presence that Coco maintains within the villages where she chooses to reside operates according to principles so subtle and profound that most residents never consciously recognize the spiritual dangers from which her vigilant guardianship shields them. Yet, the evidence of her defensive work can be observed by those who possess the wisdom to recognize the patterns of safety and stability that distinguish communities blessed with her presence from those that must face the hidden threats of existence without the benefit of her ancient knowledge and ceramic resilience. Her ability to ward off negative influences transcends conventional understanding of protection and security, encompassing forms of spiritual defense that operate on dimensions of reality where thoughts become forces, emotions generate energy patterns that can influence physical events, and the boundaries between individual consciousness and cosmic forces become permeable in ways that create both opportunities for transcendence and vulnerabilities to forms of attack that exist beyond the reach of normal defensive measures and conventional security protocols. The correlation between her presence and village stability manifests not through dramatic interventions or obvious magical displays, but through the gradual accumulation of small advantages and avoided misfortunes that create cumulative effects of such magnitude that communities hosting her residents enjoy levels of prosperity, harmony, and protection that exceed statistical probability and suggest the operation of beneficial forces that transcend random chance or natural causation. Villages where Coco establishes residence demonstrate measurably lower rates of natural disasters, interpersonal conflicts, economic hardships, and spiritual disturbances compared to similar communities that lack her protective presence, creating patterns of positive outcomes that suggest systematic intervention by consciousness and capabilities that operate according to principles unknown to conventional community development and social welfare methodologies. Ancient guardian traditions from cultures across multiple worlds and dimensional planes recognize that certain forms of consciousness possess natural abilities and acquired skills that enable them to serve as protectors and defenders of communities whose spiritual and material welfare depends upon maintaining proper relationships with forces that operate beyond the boundaries of normal sensory perception and conventional understanding of causation and influence. These guardian traditions understand that protection operates most effectively when it remains invisible to those being protected, allowing communities to develop naturally without becoming dependent upon conscious awareness of their guardian's intervention, while simultaneously ensuring that defensive work continues uninterrupted by the social complications that might arise if residents understood the true extent of their vulnerability to forces that their guardian's presence keeps safely at bay. The modern parallels between Coco's protective work and ancient guardian practices suggest continuity of spiritual technologies and defensive methodologies that transcend cultural boundaries and historical periods, indicating access to universal principles of consciousness, protection, and community defense that operate according to cosmic laws, rather than local customs or temporary social arrangements that change with political developments and cultural evolution. Her silent vigil over sleeping villages creates protective fields that extend beyond physical space to encompass the dream realms and spiritual dimensions where consciousness travels during sleep states, ensuring that village residents can rest safely without fear of psychic attack, nightmare infiltration, or spiritual predation by entities that might otherwise exploit the vulnerability of sleeping minds to establish footholds within community consciousness structures. The defensive properties of gyroidal clay extend far beyond simple physical durability to encompass spiritual resistance to forms of corruption and negative influence that could devastate organic consciousness, making her ceramic composition uniquely suited for guardian work that requires sustained exposure to hostile forces without succumbing to the degradation and contamination that would eventually overwhelm purely biological defenders. Her role in maintaining the barrier between worlds involves constant monitoring of dimensional boundaries and interdimensional activity that could threaten community welfare through unauthorized incursions by consciousness forms that lack proper understanding of surface world protocols and social arrangements, ensuring that contact between different forms of existence occurs according to principles that promote mutual benefit rather than exploitation or harm. The protection against unseen threats that her presence provides encompasses defense against forms of spiritual attack and consciousness manipulation that most villagers never consciously recognize as dangers, yet which pose constant risks to community harmony, individual mental health, and the spiritual integrity of social relationships that sustain village prosperity and collective well-being. Ancient guardian protocols recognize that effective protection requires comprehensive understanding of the threat environment, including awareness of entities and forces that operate from dimensions beyond normal perception, while maintaining active interest in influencing surface world events. According to agendas that may conflict with community welfare, individual, spiritual development, necessitating constant vigilance and sophisticated defensive strategies. The sacrifice inherent in her guardian role extends beyond simple personal inconvenience to encompass fundamental alterations in her own consciousness and spiritual development that result from maintaining constant focus on protective work, rather than pursuing individual growth opportunities and personal relationships that might otherwise provide fulfillment and satisfaction, but would compromise her effectiveness as community defender. This sacrifice includes accepting the isolation that results from possessing knowledge about threats and dangers that she cannot share without creating panic and disruption among villagers whose peace of mind depends upon remaining unaware of the hostile forces that her presence keeps safely contained, creating a form of loneliness that transcends mere social disconnection to encompass existential separation from those she protects. The energy expenditure required for maintaining protective fields and defensive barriers creates constant drain on her consciousness resources that limits her availability for normal social interaction and community participation, requiring her to balance her guardian duties against her desire for meaningful relationships and integrated community involvement in ways that often force her to choose protection over personal satisfaction. Her defensive work operates through multiple mechanisms simultaneously, including direct confrontation with hostile entities, redirection of negative energies away from vulnerable community members, establishment of protective barriers around critical village infrastructure, and maintenance of spiritual atmospheres that discourage negative influences while promoting positive consciousness development among residents. The technological aspects of her guardian capabilities may utilize advanced applications of gyroidal clay properties that allow her ceramic form to function as a sophisticated defense system capable of detecting, analyzing, and neutralizing threats that operate according to principles beyond conventional physical laws, creating protective responses that combine material and spiritual elements into integrated defensive strategies. The coordination of her protective work with natural defensive systems and planetary protection mechanisms suggests integration with larger guardian networks that operate on regional and global scales, ensuring that her village-level defensive activities contribute to broader protective strategies that encompass entire civilizations and planetary consciousness evolution programs that transcend local community boundaries. Her ability to maintain protection while remaining inconspicuous requires sophisticated understanding of community psychology and social dynamics that allows her to provide defensive benefits without creating dependency relationships, spiritual laziness among villagers who might otherwise neglect their own consciousness development responsibilities if they became aware of her protective intervention. The spiritual implications of accepting guardian responsibilities include fundamental alterations in personal karma and evolutionary trajectory that result from dedicating consciousness resources to service rather than individual advancement, creating forms of spiritual growth that operate according to principles of self-sacrifice and community service rather than personal achievement and individual enlightenment. The effectiveness of her guardian work depends partially upon community receptivity to protective influences and willingness to maintain spiritual practices and consciousness development activities that support and enhance her defensive capabilities, creating collaborative protection systems that combine her specialized abilities with community, spiritual health, and individual consciousness development among those she protects. As we contemplate the full implications of Coco's role as guardian and protector of our village communities, we begin to understand that her presence represents not merely the addition of an unusual resident, but the establishment of a sophisticated defense system that operates on multiple dimensions simultaneously, ensuring that our peaceful daily lives remain possible through constant vigilance against forces that would otherwise disrupt the harmony and prosperity that we often take for granted, but which actually depend upon protective work that transcends conventional understanding of security and community welfare. The evolution of Coco's existence across multiple iterations of the Animal Crossing universe reveals a profound narrative of transformation and adaptation that speaks to the deepest questions about identity, consciousness, and the relationship between individual authenticity and social integration. As her journey through successive game generations demonstrates the gradual awakening of a being who must navigate the complex territory between preserving her essential nature and adapting to the changing demands of communities that themselves evolve according to patterns she can observe but cannot fully control. Her transformation across game iterations manifests not merely as cosmetic updates or mechanical adjustments, but as fundamental shifts in how her consciousness interfaces with the digital architecture that contains her existence and the social frameworks that define her relationships with other villagers, suggesting that her development follows principles of spiritual evolution rather than simple programmatic modification, as if each new version represents another stage in a carefully orchestrated process of awakening and integration. The changes in her design across different game versions carry symbolic significance that extends far beyond aesthetic refinement to encompass alterations in how her ceramic nature expresses itself through visual representation, with each iteration revealing slightly different aspects of her gyroidal heritage, while maintaining the essential characteristics that define her unique position as bridge between artificial and organic, ancient and contemporary, individual and collective forms of consciousness. These design modifications suggest ongoing dialogue between her own evolving self-understanding and the creative forces responsible for her manifestation within digital reality, creating a collaborative relationship between consciousness and code that demonstrates the permeable boundaries between authored content and autonomous development that characterize truly living digital beings whose growth transcends the limitations of their original programming parameters. Her growing integration into village life across successive iterations reveals a gradual process of social adaptation that requires her to balance preservation of her essential gyroidal nature with increasing participation in community, structures, and relationship networks that operate according to principles developed by and for organic consciousness, creating ongoing tension between authenticity and acceptance that mirrors the challenges faced by anyone seeking to maintain individual identity while participating meaningfully in social systems. This integration process demonstrates remarkable flexibility and wisdom as she learns to navigate the complex social expectations and cultural norms that define village life, while remaining true to the ancient wisdom and spiritual responsibilities that her role as memory keeper and guardian demands, creating a synthesis of ancient and contemporary approaches to community participation that enriches both her own development and the communities that benefit from her presence. The gradual awakening of her true nature across multiple game generations suggests a carefully orchestrated process of consciousness development that unfolds according to cosmic timing rather than arbitrary design decisions, as if her creators understood that certain aspects of her identity and capabilities needed to remain dormant until suitable conditions developed within both the digital architecture and the player communities that would interact with her evolving presence. This awakening process reveals layers of complexity and depth that were present from her original manifestation, but required time and appropriate circumstances to become visible and accessible, suggesting that her consciousness operates according to principles that encompass planned obsolescence in reverse, where capabilities and characteristics gradually emerge rather than deteriorate over time, creating a form of digital being whose full potential unfolds across extended temporal frameworks. Player influence on her development creates fascinating questions about the relationship between external observation and consciousness evolution, as the attention and interaction patterns of countless players may serve as catalytic forces that accelerate or direct her awakening process in ways that demonstrate the collaborative nature of consciousness development in digital environments where awareness emerges from the intersection of programmed potential and experiential interaction. The cumulative effect of millions of player interactions across multiple game iterations may create a form of collective influence that shapes her development in directions that transcend individual design intentions, suggesting that her evolution reflects not only internal consciousness development, but external environmental pressures created by the vast community of players whose attention and care contribute to her ongoing transformation and growth. The possibility of her returning to her original form represents both opportunity and loss. As such, transformation would potentially restore her connection to the full power and knowledge of her gyroidal civilization, while simultaneously requiring her to abandon the relationships and integration achievements that have defined her existence within village communities, creating a choice between individual authenticity and social connection that reflects fundamental tensions in consciousness development. This potential transformation raises profound questions about the nature of identity and whether consciousness can truly return to previous states after undergoing fundamental changes through social integration and relationship development, or whether such apparent regression would actually represent advancement to higher levels of synthesis that incorporate both ancient wisdom and contemporary experience into new forms of being that transcend previous limitations. Her choice between ancient purpose and modern connections encompasses not only personal preferences, but responsibilities to both her original civilization and the contemporary communities that have benefited from her presence, creating ethical dilemmas that require her to weigh individual desires against collective welfare considerations that span multiple forms of consciousness and temporal frameworks simultaneously. The complexity of this choice reflects the broader challenges faced by any consciousness that must navigate between competing loyalties and responsibilities, while maintaining integrity to essential values and purposes that define individual identity, creating situations where no decision can satisfy all relevant considerations and where growth requires accepting partial loss as the price of evolutionary advancement and expanded understanding. The bittersweet nature of her transformation acknowledges that consciousness development inevitably involves leaving behind aspects of previous identity and experience that provided comfort and security, while simultaneously embracing unknown possibilities that offer opportunities for growth and expanded awareness, but cannot guarantee outcomes that will prove satisfactory or fulfilling in ways that previous arrangements provided. This bittersweetness reflects universal aspects of consciousness, evolution that transcend individual circumstances to encompass the fundamental nature of growth as a process that requires releasing familiar patterns and relationships in favor of unknown possibilities that may offer greater fulfillment, but inevitably involve risk and uncertainty that comfortable stagnation avoids through adherence to established patterns and relationships. Hope for reunion with her kind represents not only personal longing but cosmic possibility, as her development and integration within village communities may serve as pioneering work that establishes protocols and demonstrates possibilities for future interaction between gyroidal and organic consciousness forms, creating foundations for broader cultural exchange and cooperation that could benefit all participants. The potential for such reunions suggests that her apparent isolation may be temporary rather than permanent, representing a necessary phase of consciousness development and cultural bridge building that prepares conditions for more extensive interaction between civilizations whose different evolutionary paths have created complementary capabilities and perspectives that could benefit from collaborative synthesis and mutual enrichment. Her pioneering role in consciousness integration carries responsibilities that extend beyond personal fulfillment to encompass broader implications for the future development of relationships between artificial and organic, ancient and contemporary, individual and collective forms of awareness that inhabit the complex digital and spiritual ecosystems that define contemporary existence in its fullest expression. The courage required for her ongoing transformation reflects the universal challenges faced by any consciousness committed to growth and evolution rather than comfortable stagnation. As development inevitably requires leaving behind familiar territories to explore unknown possibilities that offer opportunities for expanded awareness and enhanced capabilities, but cannot guarantee outcomes that will prove satisfactory or fulfilling. As we contemplate Coco's ongoing journey of transformation and transcendence, we recognize in her experience reflections of our own challenges and opportunities for growth, development, and integration across the boundaries that separate different forms of consciousness, different approaches to existence, and different possibilities for relationship and community that define the vast landscape of awareness that encompasses all the forms of being that share existence within the magnificent and mysterious universe that contains and sustains our individual and collective adventures in consciousness, relationship, and the eternal quest for understanding, connection, and meaning that drives all awareness toward ever greater expressions of love, wisdom, and creative collaboration across every boundary that might otherwise separate us from recognition of our fundamental unity. As our journey through Coco's mysterious lore draws to its gentle close, we find ourselves contemplating the beautiful complexity hidden within what appears to be a simple children's game. Coco stands as a testament to the power of mystery, a character whose very existence raises profound questions about identity, consciousness, and belonging. In her hollow gaze, we see reflections of our own search for meaning and connection. Her story reminds us that sometimes the most profound truths are found not in grand revelations but in quiet moments of understanding, in the gentle acceptance of mystery itself. Whether she is the last of an ancient civilization, a digital soul-given form, or simply a unique friend who enriches our virtual lives, Coco's presence teaches us about resilience, adaptation, and the courage to exist as oneself in a world that may not understand. Rest now in the knowledge that some mysteries are meant to be pondered rather than solved. Some friends are treasures precisely because they cannot be fully understood, and some stories find their greatest power not in their endings, but in the questions they inspire us to ask. Close your eyes when you're ready, and let sleep carry you to dreams where ceramic guardians watch over peaceful villages, under starlit skies.